What's going on, everybody? It's live. Spring football practice is going on. We're going to talk about it. A breakout receiver potentially that we want to talk about. Some injuries that I think are kind of interesting because players need to be out there. But honestly, it's just the season is here. Let's talk about it. Let's have fun on Wisconsin.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Locked On Badgers, your team every single day. I'm your host, Ryan Herrings, as always. Really do appreciate everybody tuning in. Today's show brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/Locked On today to get started. We're going to bring Justin on, Justin.
Ryan, are you there?
What is going on?
The bright lights of spring have blinded me. Practice has started.
For those on a podcast right now, because Justin forgets half of our audience is on a podcast. Justin's got the shades on. Listen, it is exciting. It's exciting. We're finally here, Justin. We're finally able to talk about real football, things happening on a football field, quarterbacks throwing the ball, receivers catching it. Here we are, spring practice one. Listen, there's a lot of ways to go. Let's not take too much out of it, but there are some interesting nuggets here. I want to start with the offensive depth chart, the offense. I don't think there's too many surprises there, but let's start with Chris Brooks Jr., receiver, 6'2", 225, and a player that shouldn't come out a complete surprise to us because he was getting hype at the end of last year. He was a player that people were saying, this guy is better than we thought. He's a big physical receiver. He is fast. Like as you mentioned before the show, we've seen him on some of the Need for Speed tweets from Brady Collins. And suddenly you have this 6'2", 225-pound guy who's different than the rest of the receivers. And that's something that gets you reps, is being different, giving something unique.
Yeah, he's a guy I don't know what you do with if you're a cornerback, if he does have speed, because he's going to be more physical than you. Like there are not 6'2", 225 cornerbacks, out there playing that are running a 4.6 or better probably. So he's a guy who's going to be able to play some bully ball out there. And with the catch radius he likely has is going to be a problem because he's going to be able to kind of box you out and make plays. So if he can run, I mean, that's really hard to deal with.
Mm-hmm. And he's a player too. Players, I've learned this because I do this too, right? I'm a fan. I follow recruiting. I do this too. He's a player who came in late in a class without a lot of hype, a lower ranked receiver in a group that we had other players that I feel like we had higher ceilings on potentially. Yeah. He was looked at as kind of a blocking receiver, not a lot of other big time recruiting offers. So just you come in that recruiting profile, it's harder for you to gain attention. But suddenly if you just forget the recruiting profile for a second, just look at the measurables potentially. 6'2", 225, like you said, with the speed, somebody who was getting hype last year, who is already getting some hype this year. This might be a real player here that we haven't talked about enough. So I'm excited about that.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think you look at it, and I think coming out of high school, he's a bit of a tweener. Like there were people that were wondering if he's a little too small for tight end and not quite fast enough for wide receiver. And I think the problem with that is it really comes down to how developed is this guy in terms of what he's actually hit in high school. With his measurables coming out of high school being 6'2", I think it was like 220 coming out of high school. There are probably a lot of people who are like, he's already so big. Like, is he going to be able to get quicker? Or are we going to lose speed if we put him in strength and conditioning and have to play him at tight end and he's a little undersized for that? I think what we're finding is maybe he was, a little untapped physically still, and was a guy that in strength and conditioning has actually kind of picked up a couple of ticks. Mm-hmm. So maybe he's quicker than you thought. And now if he's getting more stronger, more physical, and you can keep him split out wide, like you don't need to really pigeonhole him with a position. Like if he's fast and he's big, does it really matter if he's a wide receiver or a tight end? It doesn't.
No. Can I tell you something that's been rattling around in my brain with Brooks, but also with Pauling, with some of these other receivers? This new offense with Phil Longo is open to more athletes in space. Right?
He doesn't care what you are. He just wants you to be a mismatch.
Right. It just creates more opportunities for players. Previously, Chris Brooks in this previous offense was a blocking guy. That's who he would have been. Now I think you have more room to create mismatches. There's more space. I just think this offense is going to fit their playmakers much better. Let's keep going here. We got a couple comments already.
Before we jump on that, like people that will want to compare him potentially to like somebody like Cephas, to give you some perspective on this, Cephas was like 205 when he played at Wisconsin. So he's 20 pounds heavier than him. So he's got a lot of beef on somebody like that, where he's going to be able to bully a cornerback a lot.
Yeah, and Cephas was special too, right?
Yeah.
You should be careful comparing anybody. His hands were just absolutely
he was, but my point was more from the physicality standpoint. Like we all thought he was a big physical wide receiver. Brooks has got 20 pounds on that. So there's some things there that you potentially have that we haven't seen at Wisconsin. We've never had a receiver with this type of size and frame out at the wide receiver position.
Not really, right? I mean, go back to like Marquise Mason, who was never healthy. He was probably about 6'3", 215. There's a name that people aren't going to remember. Nathan Ruffalo says, exciting times for Badger football. Let's go. I agree, man. Let's talk some more offensive stuff here. So Braedyn Locke came in as the number 2 quarterback. I'd made the prediction. Again, let's not take too much from spring practice number 1 for starters. But I do think he's probably going to be the number 2 quarterback this year. Any surprise there for you, Justin, with Braedyn Locke starting in as number 2?
Not really. I think like if you listen to the post-practice Fickell interview, he basically said that these guys are going to be rotating through. Mm-hmm. Like his goal is to have equal reps and have everyone kind of slide through early on, and then as people kind of prove themselves, go from there. I don't make a lot of it from the first practice. Now, if he stacks like 3 straight practices where he's the number 2 guy, then yeah, we need to start looking at it like he's going to be the guy. But it wouldn't shock me if the next practice that it's going to be Evers. I don't know how much the gap is going to be there. I think they probably want to make regardless of who's going to be second come season, the second and third guy are probably going to get about equal reps through spring.
Yeah,
there's just no reason not to. You got to get both of them well versed in the offense, and you want to get them reps with guys that are actually probably going to see the field. So it's not like night and day if they do have to step in later, in the fall.
I agree with you there. And low key, if you're bringing in 4-star transfer quarterbacks, you don't want to bring them in and not let them get a chance to compete.
Yeah.
Either. Like there's a component here of let's make good with what we sold you in terms of giving an opportunity to compete. So I agree with you there. One of the big battles that I was really interested in was right guard, right? Furtney starts off as right guard. Trey Weddig was on the second team at right tackle, which I love. I think he's a better tackle than a guard. And Huber was on the second team as a guard. So it looks like Furtney's getting that first crack. That's not surprising. He's obviously a 5th-year guy. My biggest takeaway from that is moving Trey Weddig out to right tackle again. I think that's where he's always meant to be. I don't like him at a guard spot. I think he's a right tackle.
I think it is somewhat telling that Huber was with the second team guard, because this is a guy that started 13 games last year at right tackle for Cincinnati. So it tells you what they think of him at right tackle versus what we have in house, that they feel better about him sliding inside and taking that spot. He probably has a better opportunity for playing time in there. But also I think it tells you how good they feel about the tackle position. Now we'll see what Bicknell thinks going forward with these guys. It's going to be a little bit different for all of them. For all we know, we find out that these guys are much better able to perform in this type of setup with wider splits and maybe a little bit more pass set. They actually were pretty good in pass protection last year.
Right. I agree. Yeah. I think it's, especially the tackle spots, guys like Maulman and Nelson, who aren't huge maulers. Like the traditional Badger right tackle is like 325 pounds, like Rob Havenstein, those type of dudes. These guys aren't that. Nelson's 305. Maulman 6'8" and like 308, right? Yeah. Like they're longer, leaner tackles that honestly, this offense might suit them better, which is going to be amazing to see. Let's talk about this. This is a comment from Deborah Drown. Deborah, thank you for the comment. The practice script was timed to be completed in 2 hours, 15 minutes. It was done to the coach's satisfaction in 3 minutes under that. Great intensity. We heard great intensity, great tempo, fast paced, all these adjectives about the practice. And none of that should surprise us, but it's refreshing to hear it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a big deal that it seems like no time is wasted and that he's really pushing these guys to move. I think it's a big deal because I think we did lose something on the strength and conditioning standpoint. And I think getting these guys to move, like this will help you later in games. If you're conditioning and you have your, cardio up so that late in games in the fourth quarter, you're not winded as much. And that when you need to lean on somebody, when you do need a drive, that it's there for you to go and grab it and not that you're just tanked at that point.
Yeah. The interesting thing, and this ties in with what you're saying, ties in with what Deborah was saying, Coach Fickell was, very adamant about we do conditioning in practice. And I always love that concept on the basketball side too. You go to some practices and you see teams running sprints at the end. Why don't you just incorporate that into a fast break drill? Incorporate that into skill development. And I love that they're doing that in the football program because you can do that while practicing things. You don't have to separate them.
I actually think it's better because it's functional at that point. Like, you want these guys winded while they're doing the drills. They should be, working hard so that they are getting gassed and have to push themselves during practice rather than at the end when it's like, okay, now we need to get our wind up.
Agreed. All right, we're going to take a very quick break for our friends of the show. We're going to come back, talk some defense, including a bit of a surprise maybe at the safety spot, Justin, who started out today. We're going to talk about that next on Locked On Badgers. But first, today's show is brought to you. I'm going to leave Justin on this one because he get his NBA pick here. Today's show is brought to you by our good friends over at FanDuel. We talk about FanDuel a lot. America's #1 sports book, our sports book friends. NBA season winding down. Could this thing just end, please? Like the NBA season just needs to be over. Playoffs need to get here. March Madness is wrapping up.
Get your dark horse Giannis MVP picks in. And also, I mean, clearly the Bucks are going to win.
Put the money on the Bucks. That's where Justin is.
I did already. I put my money where my mouth is.
He's gone to FanDuel. He's on the Bucks. Get your no sweat first bet up to $1,000 back. That's free bets back if your bet doesn't win, plus single game parlays, same game parlays, I should say. Wrap up your points, rebounds, assists, all into one game for a bigger payout. Download the free app. It is safe, secure, super easy to use. Get your no sweat first bet. Bet on the Bucks, just like Justin's doing, or bet on the Suns like I'm doing. If Durant could ever get healthy, it would be super great. Plus FanDuel
time for the finals.
Oh gosh, just bro, get healthy. Get a bionic ankle. Don't miss your chance for the no sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets back when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, let's keep talking here, Justin. Let's talk defense a little bit. We talked.
I want to stop you before we jump into that. We got one more receiver I'd like to talk about, and is somebody we've talked about a little bit before coming into this. Will Pauling apparently had a nice little day to him. Couple of touchdown catches. Apparently was just carving guys up when he got in space, which is exactly what we've talked about. And it sounds like people are expecting him to kind of have a role. And in this offense, and you and I have discussed this previously, and we brought it up on the podcast, this type of offense is tailor-made for that guy that can get loose in the middle and just wreak havoc. Mm-hmm. It's why we love Treach so much in it. It's why we like Pauling. Like, regardless of which one of those two guys it is, they are going to cause problems, even for good teams, because of the fact that they're very twitchy, they're very quick, and they're very fast and elusive. And they're going to be a problem because you can't really put a safety on them. And you're definitely not putting a linebacker on them. So unless you have a slot corner that you absolutely love, these guys are going to get open on plays consistently.
Yeah. Also, just to your note on Will Pauling, returning punts, he was reported as practice. Him and Chimre as the punt return guys. Pauling is absolute lightning in a bottle. Like, he is electric speed. Again, we talked to Brady Collins. That's the fastest receiver / defensive back on the team. Yep. I mean, that's the first name he mentioned.
Anyone who's looked at his tweets, he has been in the top 3, I think, every time.
Yeah.
Was he there every time?
I believe
I don't think he always took first, but I think he was in the top 3 in every one.
He's got absolute wheels, man. And TJ mentions here another receiver. This room is getting scary good. Speaking of another receiver, speaking of Brooks, I've never seen this in the history of Badger football. Scott Francois goes back and says, not a better group of receivers since the times of Altoon, Michael Jones, and Thad McFadden. There are some names there that are going in the Wayback Machine. I love it. Thank you, Scott, for the comment.
Jesse Temple was throwing out there a lot of playmakers for this team. He was out on Twitter saying it, and I agree with it. Like, this is a stacked room. There's going to be, we'll hear much more about the offense holding its own against the defense than we've seen in the past. I still expect the defense to be more impressive, but it's going to be more of a matchup than what we've seen in the past.
And TJ also, really quickly, I know it's not a Suns show. He's saying Durant is going to be over under playoff game 6. Sorry, Ryan. I got to take the over because I'm a Suns fan. I got to do it. All right, let's keep talking Badgers here. Nobody's here for my Suns takes except for TJ, which I love, by the way. We'll talk later. Defense, started out on 2-4-5. A couple things that interest me from the first team defense here, Justin, that just stick out to me. Starting safeties, Wooler and Blaylock. Now, again, first practice, the same thing we talked about on the offensive side. People are going to rotate through, but it is interesting to me. And if you go back to last year, Blaylock was one of the starters. He's a physical freak show. I mean, he's an absolute freak show physically. He's an experienced player, back from the injury. It's possible, right? It's possible that Latu maybe, or maybe not Latu's on the second team, but maybe Blaylock has a bigger role than we were talking.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where they're looking at it and they want to get his eyes right again because he hasn't really been on the field a lot. And it's probably, let's get you a lot of visual reps so you kind of have an idea what you're looking at out on the field again. So we get you ready to go. I don't think they're too worried about Latu in terms of him being ready to play. I think they probably are a little bit more about Blaylock mentally, kind of because, he spent a lot of time off the field being injured throughout his career. And it's a matter of let's get you up to speed because we feel like there's a place for you. And I'd agree with that. Like, I think he's one of our top 4 safeties, and that's no disservice to the other guys that are out there. But I think there's a lot of depth at that position. And when we look at that position athletically, unless he lost something due to injury, he was probably our most athletic safety.
Yeah. And I think it's positive. The biggest positive I take out from that is he's healthy enough and ready to participate. He's limited. He's in a no contact jersey,
but he's moving.
But he's moving, right? And that's a big, not even if that's just a huge depth addition, right? People get banged up, people get hurt. If you can go 4 deep at safety and not have a huge drop off, that's a big deal the course of a Big Ten regular season. Especially
given we'll probably have sets where we're running three safeties. Like, I think that's going to happen. It wouldn't shock me 20%, 30% of this, season. We're seeing this first practice. That's whatever sets we're lining up in right now are meaningless. They're right now assessing how guys move on the field and where they feel like they'll be best suited to play.
Let's go to outside linebacker, Justin. Daryl Peterson, who shocks nobody. Lining up at first team at one of the spots. CJ Getz at the other spot. Getz is interesting. A guy that, quite frankly, we weren't even sure at the end of last year if he'd be back or not. Made an announcement he'd come back. A lot of Badger fans, I shouldn't say a lot. There were some grumblings about we want to see the younger players from Badger fans. I made a post at the time, like, more depth is always good. I would like him back. The coaching staff will figure it out. But does it surprise you that we still haven't seen maybe Caden Johnson, TJ Bowlers, somebody else? Aaron Witt is still hurt, but I don't know. Let me just frame it like that. Does it surprise you that CJ Getz is breaking as the first team outside linebacker?
No. If he's still there at the end of practice, the end of spring practice, it'll be a little more interesting because I think there are some younger guys that will push. Especially, we showed out in a 2-4-5, I believe.
We did. Yep.
So I think we're going to probably be more of closer to like a traditional 4-3, in all honesty, with the way we line up a lot of the times. So I think we're going to see those guys out there more, like the bowlers out there lining up hand in the dirt in certain situations because they feel comfortable with him doing that. And I think he feels comfortable doing that because he played 3 years of high school at that. And now he's done a little bit of both. But I think we're going to see get more of those guys being used as flat out pass rush guys.
Right. Yeah, I agree with you there. It doesn't surprise me either. And again, I think CJ Getz on the team is a good thing. I think having another veteran on the team, he's solid. He can set the edge. He's been a durable player. In depth, just like the safety position, depth is always better. More quality players is always better. Let's pivot to cornerback. Hallman, we asked who's going to be the number 2, number 3 corners potentially. Again, I keep saying this, we don't know the answers to those questions yet, but Hallman started off as the number 2 corner today outside of Alexander Smith. Seemed to have a good game. Younger player that has some upside for sure.
I think that was expected. He's the most experienced out of that group. So I think that he's a guy that maybe just needed some reps last year to kind of get his feet wet. I think he'll actually play pretty well. So I think that there's a solid chance that he's out there. It wouldn't shock me if you see some of the other young guys break in and get reps too. It sounds like DeCluna and Jace Arnold both played with the second team, which that's impressive. Those guys are in the room or on the field for second team reps, their first spring. That's a big deal. Yeah. So we'll see what those guys bring to the table. But I think athletically, we really like where that room is going with those guys, adding a lot to it.
Zach Bartz adds Braedyn Moore at nickel cornerback today was interesting. Could be a solid fit there. I think he's just a hybrid. I think Braedyn Moore potentially in a lot.
He's a little bit more that Jason Maitre, where they think he's athletic enough that he can play that role, but they like the fact that it's going to probably bring him down closer to the box, and he's a guy who's capable of also putting a hit on somebody in the run game.
Yeah, he is great size, man. One of the interesting comments with Braedyn Moore, again, this was from Brady Collins. I asked him about, what does Braedyn Moore look like? And he said, not a freshman. So that's a great comment there. I think he's got a bright future for this team for sure. Let's talk some injury. Unless there's anything else defensively, I do want to point out Petroyski, the Michigan State transfer, was on the second team outside linebacker position. I think that's a spot he could push. I'm excited to see where he might.
Yeah, I think that's, if there's somebody that I saw pushing him, I think it's going to be him, because he's a guy that has actually put productive reps starting on the field for a Big Ten team before. And he brings more from a pass rush standpoint than what Getz has been able to do in the past. So we'll see what happens there. But I think that's a position that Getz is going to have to really fight to hold on to that spot. Yeah,
which is what you want, right? Yep. Like, if he fights and he hangs on to it and he's a starter, then hats off to him for sure.
That's what he had a good spring.
Let's go injuries, Justin. A couple ones here: Cole Dakovich, Clay Cundiff, Darian Varner, Cole LaCrue, Bryson Green, Mike Jarvis, Max Loffey, and Aaron Witt. So I kind of just made a big list of ones that are interesting to me for various reasons. I want to start with the tight end position in general, right? You're still missing Cundiff, Dakovich, Cam Large.
Cundiff, we knew. Dakovich, he's getting to the point where we need to see him get on the field. Like, he's been injured since he got here. It feels like every year he's had something, and he's kind of like, our tight end room has got to be like, it's like a MASH ward going on there. Like,
and it's been years. It's been several years.
Like 3 years we've had massive injuries at the tight end position.
They just cannot get healthy.
Now, thankfully, this is an offense that we can get away with some of it, but man.
Well, listen, it's going to open a door for JT Seagreaves, right? We talked about JT, younger athletic guy, but you still got to be healthy.
Or Jack Pugh,
Oh, Jack Pugh as well, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. Eschenbach is back as well. I think we kind of know who he is at this point, but I think he probably fits this offense better than the previous one as well. He's more of a pass-catching guy than an inline blocker.
Well, same with Pugh and Seagreaves for sure. I think those are guys that you want to split out. Like, we love the two guys that we have coming in Steck and
Booker.
Who is it? Booker. Similar body types, like 6'5", 6'6", long, lean guys who are athletic and can run. So they have some guys out there that they feel comfortable splitting out and running routes. So it's good to see that we have a couple of bodies like that already on the team.
Let me give you a couple injuries that I think stink. I mean, injuries always stink, but Max Loffey coming into a year where I think it's a bit of a make or break year for him.
He probably would have been pushing on with Maitre at the slot spot, and it stinks that he's not getting the spring reps to show what he can do.
Yep, and I want to throw this out there too, because I've heard the note, well, it's spring ball, it's not a big deal. Every rep matters. Like, it's not the end of the world, but
they're interviewing for a spot with a new staff. Like, this staff knows nothing about them as what their ceiling is or their baseline is. Like, the spring is where you show the staff what they can expect from you from a consistency standpoint, so that you have an opportunity to say, hey, I may not be making a ton of flash plays, but I'm not making mistakes, which is where a guy like Getz, we've seen from what we've seen, he's a guy that does pretty darn good job in keeping the run taken care of. And there's some juice there for pass rush. We'd just like to see a little bit more out of him.
Well, yeah, it's definitely there. And then I think it's also, it's a new system on both sides of the ball. So, like, you're impressing a new staff, but let's say
learning.
Jim Leonard was the guy, right? There would be at least defensively, a continuation of what you were doing. It's a brand new scheme everywhere. New position coaches everywhere. Like, this is an opportunity to get a leg up. So Loffey, to your point, showing the coaching staff what they have, getting used to a new scheme. And quite frankly, Kyle Shanahan for the 49ers talks about this a lot. You get better at playing. Like, when he's talking about the NFL reduced,
more comfortable.
Reps. Yeah, reps matter. Darian Varner's another one in a crutch, in a walking boot. I had him penciled in as a potential starter this year. I think I still do, but not if you're not playing. That's a big injury to me.
I agree with that. This is where he could have made a splash this spring and been a guy who, coming into the fall, they feel really confident in him being ready to go. Now, clearly, I don't know when this injury happened, because it's clear that he must have done some real work in the spring, conditioning to get himself up to, 278?
Yeah, he put on some weight.
Yeah. So he's putting work in. We'll see. Hopefully it's a short-term thing, and maybe he'll be limited by the end of spring or something. We can get him out there so he can at least get his feet wet.
The other one that bummed me out, man, and all these bummed me out, by the way, Bryson Green, it sounds like it's not a big deal. So that one,
He's already running routes, so
Yeah.
he's just limited.
So that one seems okay. It bums me out that Cole LaCrue came in early to get a jump on the offense, and he can't throw. Like, he wasn't going to compete this year for a spot, not with the depth on the program. But the whole point of coming in early as a quarterback is to get those reps, to get that familiarity, and to not be able to throw is a bummer. Cole LaCrue hurt his arm, so he's out as well. That one just bums me out personally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're all big LaCrue fans here. I would have loved to hear some good things about him in the spring, how he's better than they anticipated. Hopefully he's a guy that can come back towards the end of camp too and maybe show a few things. Hopefully it's nothing major for him. And we find out that that this is short-term precautionary stuff and he'll feel better. For all we know, maybe it's just he's just tired his arm out and they're just taking it easy on him.
Yeah, I think it's a little more than that, unfortunately. Okay. Yeah, well, but it is a bummer for any true freshman, to come in early. Like, you're seeing Jace Arnold, to your point, Braedyn Moore getting reps right away, DeCluna getting reps right away. That's the whole point of coming in early as a freshman, to get that big jump. So that one kind of bumps me out. Uncultured Barbarian said he just got back from John Wick 4. It's effing awesome. Thanks, buddy. Let's go. I got to watch that one. Logan Couch, we're winning a national championship. I hope so. I mean, yeah, I'm here for it.
I'm not going to argue with you, all right? If we somehow put it together and have a magical season, well, then I think then we need to give Luke Fickell a raise and bump him up to $13 million a year and been like, listen, you did something that nobody expected at Wisconsin, and we can't let you go anywhere else.
Yeah. Let's talk football. Cole's got a cast on his throwing arm. He's in one of my classes.
Okay.
Yeah, he did something there, unfortunately. TJ said, give me Getz as a backup. That's been a popular kind of thing, because the upside's not there, right? The athletic upside for CJ Getz, as much as we love the dependability, the consistency.
Listen, he plays hard. None of us will ever dog him. It's kind of like Jack Dunn, and they're not the same player at all. But Jack Dunn played his butt off for Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm.
But what you're hoping to get out of that position is, from what we've seen in the past, is a guy that you're hoping we can get, between 7 and 11 sacks. And we haven't seen that type of production from him.
Correct.
Now, he's great against the run, but we also need to have a pass rush, because quite frankly, I don't think anyone knows what we're going to have from our pass rush this season. And that's where there's some concern. It's
really my biggest question mark, man. And I hesitate to even bring it up, but Aaron Witt is still out.
Yeah.
I just doggone it, man.
He needs a bionic foot too.
Yeah.
Heck with Durant. We're giving it to Aaron Witt. We need to see what he can do.
Rajiv chopping in, believe with Rajiv. Best news of today is the up-tempo nature of the practice, setting the tone for the program as we expected. And then Bo Dragon, Colorado versus Wisconsin in the playoffs. I would take that. Yes, let's go.
Is this women's NCAA tournament volleyball or something?
It's not football.
But listen, Dion may turn them around a little bit, but he's in Power 5 now. This is not a place where he's going to out-recruit everyone by a wide margin. USC is going to come to play, so he better bring it.
Well, he is going to be in a depleted Pac-12. Let's at least USC is leaving. So
not this year though.
They're not going very far this year. Let's be honest. All right, we're going to wrap it up there. We're going to have a bunch more shows coming up. I think an interview with a recruit tomorrow, so look for that. Appreciate everybody tuning in. Again, it's just day one of practice, so we're here to overreact, but also it is just day one of practice.
Let's let them get the pads on, but it's good to hear them running around out of the field again.
Yep. Lots more coming up on Wisconsin. Let's go and keep it going.